And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, who will be a very familiar face to most of you. I don't even know whether I have to introduce you, Barbara. I'll skip that part. She's been with the festival since 2009 and has been very responsible for the wonderful programming that we have throughout this festival. And she's been our artistic director since 2014. Barbara's very immersed in the arts and culture scene, and when she's not dealing with the work of the festival, she's active in community theater and has performed in more than 30 plays over the past decade, and she's good. I've watched her. As producer, she has presented one-act plays, Pretty Pieces, and Dreams and Desires, as well as co-produced several short films. Prior to joining the Writers' Festival, she co-produced and hosted 2 seasons of TV Cogeco's Page Turner's Kingston Book Club. I have had the pleasure of working with Barbara for the last few years, and it is my great honor to introduce our artistic director, Barbara Bell.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. Gail Bowen, an associate professor of English at First Nations University of Canada, now retired. Gail Bowen, at the age of 45, am I okay to mention that? Embarked on an unexpected new career as a mystery author. Gail created a now beloved amateur sleuth in Joanne Kilbourne, a widowed mother and grandmother, political analyst, and university professor whose abhorrence of injustice frequently leads her to get involved in criminal investigations. In addition to writing the award-winning Joanne Kilbourne series, Gail is a playwright who has had several plays produced and also wrote a radio play, The World According to Charlie D., which was based on a character in her books. Numerous of her Joanne Kilbourne novels have been produced as movies made for television, and you may have seen those. Widely regarded as one of the best mystery writers in Canada today, winner of the Crime Writers of Canada Arthur Ellis Award, and described by the Ottawa Citizen as a national treasure, Gail continues to write Joanne Kilbourne mysteries, 17 of them to date. We don't ever want her to stop. Please welcome Gail Bowen.
Thank you all for being here, and thank everyone. I know you did a really good job of thanking everyone, Jeannie, but I think we're all, any of us who do this are, yes, thank you. It's okay, good. I'm accustomed anyway. But we do realize, any of us who do book festivals, how many volunteers it takes to make this all appear seemingly effortless, and it does. Ted and I have had a wonderful time, and we have been very well cared for, and I know all of you have felt this too. So, at any rate, as Barbara said, oh God, life's so complicated when you get old. I'm turning my book open. Okay, I thought I'd done that before. Anyway, this is from What's Left Behind, and that was the 16th Joanne Kilbourne novel that was published last March. And I think it's right for the beginning, so I don't think I have to say very much. And anyway, this will be a short reading, probably about 9 or 10 minutes, and then Barbara and I will sit down and chat, and then you can ask questions, which is always lots of fun. When I picked up the phone on the morning of my son Peter's wedding and heard Warren Weber's deep, bourbon-cured bass, I smiled. Warren and his wife Annie were among my favorite people, but Warren was 80 years old and didn't believe in preamble, so my pleasure was short-lived. I hope this is an unnecessary phone call, Joanne, he said, but I thought you and Zach should know that my son signed himself out of Valley View this morning. His doctor doesn't believe Simon's ready to be released, but he entered Valley View voluntarily, so he was free to leave. My nerves clenched. Do you think Simon plans to show up here? I don't know. And the doctor didn't say, but Simon's obsession with Lee Crawford drove him to the hospital in the first place. Lee is her sister's maid of honor, we have to consider the possibility that Simon may be headed for the wedding. Lee's been worried about that, I said. Did Simon's doctor have any advice about how to handle the situation if he does show up? Dr. Fidelix suggested that we focus on preventing that from happening, Warren said. Annie and I are still in the city. One of my oldest friends died this week, and I'm helping his widow with the arrangements. As soon as I'm through, Annie and I will come straight to Lawyers Bay. If we haven't heard from Simon by then, we'll park outside the gates and wait. If Simon arrives, we'll get him across the lake to our cottage before he does anything we'll all regret. Thanks, I said. I don't know what else we can do. I just hope you don't have to wait around on the road. Warren chuckled, sitting in an air-conditioned limousine with a beautiful 25-year-old who loves me. I'll be fine, Joanne. So will Annie, and so, I hope, will Simon. One way or another, we'll see that he gets the treatment he needs. I hope so, I said. Zach was still at Faulkner Shreve when Simon started with the firm, and he thinks highly of him. Good, because I may need Zach's help to get my son back to the hospital, Warren said, and then he broke the connection. Being alone with my husband on a beach that was as much a part of our handprints, as our handprints, was another gift to savor, so I hadn't mentioned Warren's phone call. But when I saw the solitary figure standing inside the gazebo, looking out at the water, I lowered my voice instinctively. That's Simon Weber, I said. Zach turned his head abruptly. I thought he was at Valley View. He was, I said. We were well out of earshot, but we spoke in whispers. Warren called when you were in the shower. Simon checked himself out this morning because he knew Lee would be here for the wedding. That's Warren's guess. Mine, too. Let's hope Simon doesn't know Lee's already here. Warren and Annie were planning to come over a couple of hours before the wedding, wait outside the security gate and spirit Simon away if he showed up. But Simon short-circuited their plan, Zach said. Valley View's just outside Fort Capel, less than half an hour away. He must have come straight to Lawyers Bay. Zach's gaze was still on Simon. Did Warren have any idea what shape his son is in? Simon's been in the hospital for a month, I said. He might have made some progress. He had a long way to go, Zach said. As we talked, we'd continued to move toward the gazebo. Now Zach took my arm and we stopped. Joe, I never told you, but Lee came to me about Simon last month. She's a strong woman, but Simon had spiraled out of control. He'd never had a problem with alcohol, but he was drinking heavily and showing up at her farm at all hours, threatening to kill himself if she didn't come back to him. The night before he checked himself into the hospital, Simon arrived at Lee's farm after midnight, drunk and incoherent. He pounded on her door until she answered it, then tried to push his way into her house. Lee slammed the door on him, but he was too drunk to drive, so she went back outside to try to get his keys. He put up a fight and knocked her down. She's sure it was an accident because when he saw her flat on her back in the driveway, he started to cry. Said he was a worthless human being who didn't deserve to live. He begged her to forgive him. Lee's fall had knocked the wind out of her, and it took her a moment to get her bearings. By the time she was on her feet, Simon was in his car gunning the motor. In his haste to get on the road, Simon ran over Lee's old Tomcat. She called the police, gave them Simon's license number, and told them he was drunk and driving on Highway 33, about 75 kilometers south of the city. Then she wrapped her cat in a towel and took him out behind the barn and buried him. Oh, God, poor Lee, I said. I had no idea the situation was that bad. Lee didn't want anyone to know, Zach said. She was trying to protect Simon, but when she came to see me, she was desperate. She'd been too keyed up to sleep, and the police had been unable to find Simon. You know how it is around Lee's place, a lot of gravel roads and abandoned farms with outbuildings. Simon probably pulled in somewhere and passed out. Anyway, he was still officially with Faulkner Shreve, so we couldn't take on Lee as a client. I arranged with Eddie Kirk to meet with her and have a restraining order issued. Zach, Simon is the son of one of your major supporters. I should have known about the restraining order sooner. I agree, he said, but Warren wanted as few people as possible to know about it. Not long after Simon was served, Faulkner-Shreve put him on medical leave and he checked himself into Valley View. And now he's signed himself out, I said. Yes, Zach said, and it's time to see how he's doing. Ready to talk to him? As ready as I'll ever be, I said. Simon seemed rooted to his spot in the gazebo. I'd only met him twice, and both encounters had been brief, but in retrospect they seemed significant. The first was the previous July at Faulkner-Shreve's annual Canada Day party at Lawyers Bay. Simon was with Lee. It was mid-afternoon, and they'd been water skiing. Lee was tanned, and like her twin sister Maisie, she had shoulder-length copper curls. She was just a shade under 6 feet tall, and in her form-fitting one-piece ivory suit, she was stunning. Simon was tall and fine-featured with black hair cut short. His body was boyishly slender, and he had the kind of fair skin that sunburns easily. His face, chest, and back had already turned scarlet. He was oblivious. The woman at his side captured his complete attention. Later that afternoon, I watched Simon choose a beach towel from the stacks we'd piled on a trestle table near the water. He went through the piles twice, rejecting snazzy cabana stripes and cartoon whales, to finally settle on a matching pair in denim blue soft cotton. Good choice, I said. He hugged the towels to his body. Do you believe in love at first sight, he asked. Maybe not quite first sight, I said, but sometimes knowing that you've met the right person doesn't take long. Simon nodded. Today I found the person who can save me. His smile was heartbreaking. Now comes the hard part, convincing her. The next time I saw Simon was at the firm's black-tie Christmas party. Like Simon, our son Angus was an associate at Faulkner-Shreve. The two men often worked out together in the firm's weight room, and in the 5 months since I'd last seen him, Simon had developed the physique of a man who looked good in a tux. That night, he and Lee were a head-turning couple, but not a happy one. Simon was painfully solicitous, and Lee was kind, but her smile was distant. She had moved along. Auden's poignant lines, "If equal affection cannot be, let the more loving one be me," flashed through my mind. In the weeks and months that followed, Simon paid a high price for being the more loving one. But Lee paid an equally high price for being the one more loved. Until Simon went to Valley View, he and Lee had been locked in a symbiosis that sucked them both dry. The man staring out at Lawyers Bay was a man who had seemingly lost everything. Pantera wandered, and that's their dog, wandered into the gazebo to check out the stranger. As Simon turned to acknowledge our dog, Simon's intake of breath was audible. Simon's body was skeletal. His clothes hung on him, and his face was pale and clawed by sorrow. "Where's your other dog?" he said. "You have a Bouvier like Lee's." "Willie died in February," I said. He was 12. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I know how much it hurts to lose a part of your life." Zach wheeled toward him. "Joanne and I miss Willie every day," he said. "It's good to be with someone who understands that. But Simon, you know you shouldn't be here today." Simon's gray eyes were beautiful, large, clear, and long-lashed, but they were filled with despair. "I couldn't stay away," he said. "Lee will be here for the wedding. For the first time in a month, I'll be close to her." I moved to Simon's side and touched his arm. "Your father talked to your doctor at Valley View this morning. Leaving the facility's a big step. Dr. Fidelic's not sure you're ready." Simon laughed jaggedly. "I'll never be ready," he said. "The literature's filled with admirably careful wording about treatment and possible outcomes of someone who suffers from my disease." His voice tightened. "Must have been drafted by lawyers, Zach. Apparently the only magic bullet for people diagnosed with BPD is the one they use on themselves." Zach gave Simon a comforting pat on the arm. "Whatever the diagnosis, you're not alone," he said, and his voice was strong and convincing. "Joanne and I will do whatever we can to help. But right now, you have to get out of here. You have enough to deal with without violating the restraining order. Can I give you a lift?" "It came in my canoe," Simon said. "It's down there, farther along the beach. My father's cottage is just across the lake, remember?" "Of course," Zach said. "Are you going to be staying with your dad and Annie for a while?" The question was meant to be innocuous, but it ignited something in Simon. His face darkened, and he leapt away from Zach, chopping the air with his hands. "I don't know where I'm going to be. Don't you get it? If I can't be with Lee, I don't care where I am." Zach and I exchanged a glance. We were both overwhelmed at the quicksilver change in Simon's mood. He had been stoic about the bleakness of his prognosis, but suddenly he was falling apart. Simon's face crumpled. He looked desperately from Zach to me. "Please talk to her. Tell her I'll do anything to be in her life again. I won't ask for intimacy. I just want to have a room in her house. I want to see her every day. I want to know she'll never leave me. I need to know that I will never be alone again." He reached out to me as he pleaded, grabbing hold of my wrists. His intensity frightened me, but I tried to keep my voice even. "Simon, what if it's impossible for Lee to do what you're asking?" I said. "You're afraid I'll harm her, aren't you?" he said. When I didn't respond, his eyes narrowed and his hands tightened on my wrists. "You don't understand. I would never hurt her. She's the only one who can lift me from loneliness. She's my last chance." Zach placed 2 warning fingers on Simon's right arm. His voice was gentle but firm. "Simon, you're hurting Joanne. Please let go of her." Simon looked in disbelief at what his hands were doing. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to." He was obviously contrite, but he seemed confused, and it was at least a minute before he loosened his grip, released my wrists, and darted from the gazebo. As he started down the beach, his eyes were wild. I went after him, but he was fast. When he came to the yellow canoe, he pushed the boat out into the lake and climbed in. It was a solo canoe, so as soon as Simon took his place, it leveled in the water. Grasping his paddle, he began knifing the waves. I called his name repeatedly, but he didn't answer. Simon was an expert canoeist, and it wasn't long before the yellow canoe disappeared from view, and I returned to Zach. His brow was creased with concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said. "But Zach, Simon needs to be back in Valley View. He's out of control." I rubbed my wrists, and he's strong.
Thank you. So I feel as though I should also be welcoming Joanne Kilburn onto the stage. Welcome, both of you. You know, we're always interested to figure out that margin where the writer ends and the character begins. What can you tell us about your relationship with Joanne?
Well, I think the question, is this working now? Okay, good. I think the question that I do get asked that frequently, is she my alter ego, or is she like me? And I think certainly the broad lines of our lives are the same. We're both, academics, and we were both academics and both retired, and we both have children, and we both love dogs, and I always wanted a 4th child, but after I had my 3rd child, the OBGYN said, you never should have had children. And I thought, well, maybe I should just stop at 3. I guess. And so Taylor, I gave, with my magical powers, I gave Joanne Taylor, and no risk to her health at all there. And so I think she is, her take on life is certainly mine. Her politics, I think, are very much like my own. I think she's also flawed, and as am I, and I think that she also feels a deep commitment to other people. She really is. She really does the J.S. Wordsworth line. What we wish for ourselves, we wish for others. Really, pretty well drives her life, I think, and so I think that she is like me. There are many things where we're different. She's a lot braver than I am, and I have a husband. She has a husband too, but I haven't had a lot of lovers in between. And I've only had one husband, and I guess this isn't exactly the place to tell him, but anyway. No, that's it. Anyway.
Should he be worried?
No, not at all.
I didn't think so.
No, not at all.
So You also seem to like to use family member names.
I do.
And tell me about your process for naming characters and why that is you've used kids,
Well,
grandkids.
yeah, and I have used. What happened was it was just per chance, but in the books, Mika was going to have. I'd made Mika pregnant in the new book, and the book that I was writing at the time. And then our daughter, Hildy, came to us and said she was pregnant. And Hildy has always, for somebody who my daughter has a degree in English, but she apparently is a little fuzzy about what fiction is, because she's always had this sort of like kind of a little jealous thing going with Mika, and I said to her, she said, so I said, so what names? I said, Hildy, what names are you considering? And she said, Emily, we're thinking of, and I said, well, that's a beautiful name, and she said, so what's Mika calling her baby? And I said, well, Madeline. And so that was that. So, and Hildy and her partner, that was how our Madeline now, who's in First Year University, that's how her name came into being. Well, 15 months later, when she had a sister, I couldn't not give her the name, give her a name in the book. And we call her name is, the dad's is Chilean. So her name is Alejandra Delia, which is, I think, is a beautiful name. But she's called Lena, is the diminutive. So Lena in the books, Maddie and Lena are the first two. So then along came the other kids, and Peyton, our grandsons Peyton and Ben they're just turned 11. They're 12 days apart in age. And I made them into the corporation pay Ben, which is not very nice. And Ben's annoyed at me about that. And then our other grandchildren, Kai and Chesney, our other grandchildren. Kai is just the newborn child of. Do you want me to continue? I'm almost done.
It's a genealogy.
My granddaughter said she was starting to explain our family once. And she said, look, just let's say it's complicated. That's it. And it is. But anyway, but Kai and Lexi are Margot's two children, and those are the names of two of our other grandchildren. And Chesney, the United Church minister, is another granddaughter. So that covers them. And Esme is our real dog. That's it. She's not.
So you said you are a dog person, yes. So Esme
yes.
is a Bouvier de Flandre.
She is. She is.
They're a great breed.
They are a great breed. She is they call them Velcro dogs because they never leave your side, and I kind of like that.
I think Joanne likes it too.
Yeah,
actually.
she does. Yeah. She does. Yeah.
And so as a lark or as a compliment, do you ever give minor supporting characters names of people you know, or do you have people asking you, work me into your next?
Sure, lots of times. Lots of times I do it for money. I mean, not for myself, for charity. I mean, a lot of times for the church, and a lot of times for good cause, and it's easy enough for me to do. And so, I mean, I do that. And then, but lots of times, too, it's just my daughter's, our granddaughter's friends or something, I'll put them in there. One year, her friend Asia Libke helped us put our Christmas lights up, and Asia's now a brilliant young lawyer, and everybody handles it. So it's that kind of thing. And the kids get a boot out of seeing their names. Sure. Last year, though, I did have you've got to be careful because there was a promising young physician. I won't say his name, but anyway, he was in there, and he was Madeline's boyfriend, and they broke up. So that physician's out of my books now.
Payback. What power you have.
Yeah, I was gonna have him go and be disbarred or whatever they do. And I thought, nah, it's a little extreme. No.
I hesitate to talk too much about the new book, What's Left Behind, because some of us may not have read it yet. So I want to now maybe turn to the environment that you find yourself in. You were not born in Saskatchewan, but you sound like a Saskatchewanite.
Well, I've lived there for 48 years,
Yeah,
so that's kind of, I think that's almost the same as being born there at this point. I grew up in Toronto, and we still spend lots of time in Toronto, and enjoy our time there. But our kids were all born in Saskatchewan and go to school there. All our kids live in Regina, and our grown children, and so that means the grandchildren are all there, and I am so grateful for that. I mean, you have no idea. The granddaughters have always come after school until they hit high school and realized there was another place they could be than with Mimi and Granddad, and so then they did that. But one of our grandsons comes every day still after school, and we see the other ones. In my cunning Anglican way, I take them to church on Sunday, which gives your parents a little break, and then also gets them to be in church, which is nice. They've all been in my Sunday school class, which is kind of cool.
Very nice. So you're now rooted in Saskatchewan, you would say.
Yeah.
And the prairies play a large role in the sort of ethos of your books, don't they? Do you want to talk about that a bit?
Yeah, I think it's, I just finished writing a book called, and it's so weird, I was asked to do this, and it's called Gail Bowen on mystery writing, and I did it because a friend of mine at U of R Press asked me, and I thought I'll be able to just knock that off, and you don't knock anything off. Everything's harder than you think it's going to be, and I really did have to think through a lot of the decisions I'd made, and many of the mistakes I'd made, but certainly one of them was not setting the books in Saskatchewan worked for me. When we had our master's class yesterday, I quoted Robert Penn Warren, who said the world a writer chooses to write about is never accidental, that it always best reflects something that writer wants to say about being alive, and about this experience that we all share of being alive. And the example he uses is Ernest Hemingway, and the fact that he always, Hemingway's books, Hemingway believed that the only way you could really, in a world where really nothing meant anything, life could only have the meaning and purpose you brought to it, and that would mean staring into the mirror every morning with this is, I don't think apocryphal, because he actually did die doing this, but having a gun in his mouth and looking into the mirror, and if he didn't pull the trigger, then he had bested death. And so, but one day he pulled the trigger, so I guess that didn't work out so well for him at the end. But I'm not minimizing it, but it just seemed like an odd exercise. But so his books, though, are always set in bull rings, or the war, or one man alone on the seas against a massive fish, and I mean, you start to think about that, and you think about an Ernest Hemingway character in Jane Austen's world, and you realize how, can you imagine any of them sipping tea at the vicarage, or any of Jane Austen's characters, in Hemingway's world? You choose something that works for you, and for me, Saskatchewan worked because there is a tradition of activism in the province, and there really is a tradition of there only is 1.3 million people in Saskatchewan, and so we are, you can actually do something about problems. You look around at a problem, and and I'm not saying we do everything we should, but you don't feel overwhelmed. You think, I can probably do this. And we also come from a very long tradition in farming of people having to be cooperative, or you would die. Ted and I, our first year in the prairies, what saved us was our neighbor coming in with a stone boat with oil on it, or we would have frozen to death. So it's that immediate. And so, I think that's a good, that for me was a very good backdrop for what I wanted to say about the fact that in my feeling is that we are all responsible for one another. That's the reason we're here, and that we owe it to everyone to have as good a life as those of us who are lucky to have good lives. And owe it to do the best we can. So that seems, and that's very much a Saskatchewan belief, and so it fits for me.
Yeah.
So I love the prairies. I love the openness, and yeah.
Yeah. So you and Joanne both, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You don't, and neither of you shy away from the hard topics. There's often political issues, there are environmental issues in this book, there's physical disability, and there's mental illness. Can you just talk about your purposes there as you introduce those harder subjects? Your mysteries are fairly, I would describe as cozy, but but there's those little
Yeah.
knife edges.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how cozy they are really when you get right down
Well,
to it. I mean,
compared to
they're,
Agatha, maybe not.
No, but I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, whatever. But I think it was interesting because yesterday in our master's class, we were talked about Sarah Paretsky, and Sarah Paretsky and I are like that. And well, I will tell you truthfully, we're Facebook friends, and she says, Gail writes lovely books. That's how close we are. And I'm not quite sure I could invite her for Thanksgiving dinner, but she was one that I took early on when I started writing. She was already writing books about Chicago and about the real life of people there, and about, as I said yesterday to our master class, that, I mean, what she writes about, and I've seen this, when Ted and I were in Chicago with our kids, once we walked down I think it's the $1 Million Mile. It's beautiful, the fabulous stores and everything that, you could even imagine. And I said to my daughter, I'll meet you. We kind of made the block. And I said, let's go over and you go down and I'll meet you in the middle of the next block. And behind that beautiful facade was just hell. It was terrible. And it was just almost as if it was a movie set, and there were people living lives of such desperation. And I think that's what Sarah Paretsky deals with in her books, and I think I like to pick up on as well in mine, is that if we do not do anything to help a problem if we ignore it. And I think particularly, you can probably tell from my books, I am particularly moved if children are involved, and I'm particularly wounded if it seems that they're not going to get that they don't have much hope. And so, I mean, it's one thing, everybody does what they can, and these books do. I mean, I've had I get some static about things that I write, and say, why would you? There's an image there that is in Kaleidoscope that a lot of people were very upset about, and but it was about a child, Joanne and Leland Hunter, her friend, are out running in the morning, and someone throws a garbage bag out of a car, and they kind of look at each other and say, oh, too lazy to bother putting it in a dumpster. And then as they get closer to it, they hear a sound seeming like a cat almost crying. And when they open it, it's an Aboriginal child who's probably under 10. And she has a blanket around her, and she's clutching a $10 bill, and she has semen coming out of her mouth. And that is, yes, and that, but that's it. The whole thing is that happens. And I could write learned tomes about that. I could write thousands of pages about that. But that one image is so terrible that it sticks with you. And so, I mean, and that's kind of, I think, one of the things a writer can do. Everybody, I mean, Ted and I live in probably, I think honestly, I would say, just by luck, we've lived there 38 years, but probably one of the most desirable areas in Regina. It's beautiful. It's, cathedral trees and big old houses, and it's 10 minutes from downtown, and it's lovely. But 10 minutes also from us is North Central, which Maclean's magazine described as the worst neighborhood in Canada. And many of us just kind of drive around and don't even want to go into North Central. But of course, this just exacerbates the problem. If you don't go in, it just continues to be what it is. And I mean, I have no answers to this. I taught at an Aboriginal university for 35 years, and I mean, we were open, and we're part of the University of Regina, and we're open to non-Aboriginal students too, so that it was mixed classes, which was great. And but I mean, it was. I thought at the end, I honestly thought by the time I retired that all of this would be better, and it seemingly isn't. And I don't know what the answers are, except I know we have to keep on going with it. And and it is. I think it's worth writing about. So,
absolutely. And so, as you say, if you're not part of the solution, you're
are
part of the problem.
Exactly.
And what a great avenue, using what you do to make your point and try to make things better.
Yeah.
Moving to the broad spectrum of mystery, there's a canon of women mystery writers, starting way back with Agatha Christie, and moving through Alice Peters and P.D. James, and then into the Sue Graftons, Elizabeth Georges, Louise Penny's. Do you read much mystery?
Yeah, I do. Probably not. I mean, I read more. I don't make any concerted effort to say I'm going to read mysteries. I mean, I will as they come along. They're just, we Ted and I belong to 2 book clubs. So sometimes belonging to 2 book clubs is about all you can do, know. But I certainly keep track of it, and I'm very interested to see. Yesterday, excuse me, in our discussion in the whatever they call it, master class. Thank you, Gail. Anyway, the master class. That we ended up, we did talk about whether there was still this almost a stigma to writing mysteries that were considered lesser than other forms of literature, and I've never felt that. I know, for example, that Louise Penny does. She's very sensitive about it, and I've always felt I can just write whatever. I mean, I write what I want to write in that very accommodating genre. Ted and I went and had dinner with Ian Rankin one night. I was introducing him at something, and so he and his publicist and Ted and I had dinner together. And I mean, his feeling is that mystery writers now are almost the only writers who really deal with social issues, and deal with also real good and evil, and that there really is and that's been kind of a shift as literary fiction becomes more focused on the individual, and me. And I mean, it's an interesting thought, I think. But yeah, I've never felt constricted.
Good. I'm curious to know if there are mystery writers that you read regularly, if there are any that inspire you, or where do you feel you fit in that whole canon?
Well, I don't know if I fit anywhere, but I do know who I love, and we both love James Lee Burke, and I wrote a review of his. I wrote a review. This was very lovely for me because I've loved him for years. And I wrote a review for the New York Review of Books that came out, I don't know, about 3 weeks ago, of his book called The Jealous Kind. And I got, not very long after the review appeared, a note from him. Because I studied medieval romance, and I immediately saw the pattern of medieval romance in this novel. And it was perfect. I mean, and there were enough. It wasn't, me just immediately trying to make it into something it wasn't. There were enough sort of hints along the way that he was, thinking in those terms of a reference to Mallory and things like that. And anyway, I got a really nice letter back from him saying not many people had picked up on that, and how pleased he was, and said, "You're not a bad writer yourself." So of course he's right there, number one.
Yeah, he's just elbowed Sarah out of
the
way.
Sarah, forget it. No Thanksgiving dinner for you, Sarah Karetsky. Yeah.
So you've continued to write excellent books featuring Joanne. I'm sure everyone's curious. What keeps you inspired to keep producing stories with this character?
Because I think there are things I don't know about her yet, and I think that just occurred to me not too long ago that there are still things in her that I don't understand, and she really interests me. And I was saying, I think what interests me more than almost anything is something. The new book, like not the one that I just read from, or the next one, which is called The Winner's Circle, and that one deals a lot with Zach's law firm and just some of the stuff going on there. But the next one after that is Joanne's past, and which is something I have not really dealt with. And her, we were talking yesterday. I'm sorry, that's awful. It's like saying I'm alluding to all the time. I'm making allusions to a party you weren't invited to. You were all invited, actually. You could have all come to that. But no, but we were talking about formative events in someone's life, and I was saying that if you're a writer and you're creating characters, so much one of the best things you can do is to decide before you begin, really, what was the formative event that really forged this person's character? What was the thing that made them want one thing more than anything? I mean, this is another line that I know about creating characters, and it's from Donnelly. But Connolly. Anyway, he says, when you're creating character, just find out what that character wants more than anything in the world, and then follow that. Follow whatever it is that character wants. That will give you the insight into that character. And the Bible says it, more elegantly. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is also. What you value, that's where everything that you. So it's interesting to have that. I think that whole idea of what was the formative event for Joanne, and I think honestly for Joanne, because she never gets over Sally. She's always coming back to it. Partly it's having Taylor, partly it's, and I read Murder at the Mendel again this week. Of what do I read and admire? Myself, actually. My grandson actually came in. I was sitting out on the deck and I was reading, and I put it face down so he wouldn't see it. But he saw. He said, "So, what are you reading, Mimi?" I said, "Oh, just nothing." And he said, "Yeah," and he picked up on it, of course. But I was reading Murder at the Mendel, and I was so struck by, how much Joanne did not get to say to Sally that she wanted to say, and how much she came to understand her far, like even way further on in the book. She came to start to see some of the truth about her and about her life, and what she had been so formed by that rejection. And what she perceived as rejection, that that made her very much the way she is, and makes her. I think that's what. And in a way, you can have a formative event in your life that does not have a bad outcome. I mean, as far as your character is concerned, Joanne is so careful never to hurt anyone, and she is such an inclusive person. And I think that comes out sometimes if you have felt a rejection. And so so I think that Sally is and that will be something in the next book. The next book.
Well, we will anticipate that. We all continue to be curious about Joanne and who she is. I have pages and pages, but I would like, if it's all right, to open it up to the audience now for questions, because I'm sure there are many who'd like to go first. You're going to wait until you get a microphone, if you would, so we can all hear that question when it comes. Here's one here. And here comes a mic.
Hi. I remember a few years ago you mentioning that you were writing some books for young people who were not good readers, and that was a project of yours. Mm-hmm. And I just wondered if that was ongoing or where that might stand, if you would comment.
I did. Thank you. And the Charlie DeHonick books, there are 4 of them, and they were published by Orca Press. And I don't foresee, this was at the beginning. Orca was going to do this reluctant readers thing, and they have so many writers. Gail Anderson's here. She's another one who writes for Orca there. But the first ones were, Bob Tyrrell asked me if I would do 4, and so that was good. But I really have found that just that was fine, and they've done well there. It's interesting. I wanted to write a book with a character, a hero, who was not somebody who had every single, not the soap opera hero with every blessing. And Charlie DeHonick was a character who grew out of a character that I probably told you that when I talked about the book, but somebody that we met on the train for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and a guy who had a birthmark that covered half his face, and he was wearing a shirt a T-shirt, and I did what everyone does when you're confronted with something you don't know truthfully, where you don't know where to put your eyes. And so I looked at his shirt, and it said, "Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." And he said, "You want to see the back?" And I said, "Yeah." And he turned around, and it was from a beer company. And when he turned around again, I saw, of course, that it said, "Beauty is in the eye of the beer holder." And so I realized that kid, that young man, he was in anthropology at Lakehead, and he had, every time he walked into a room, he had to deal with this somehow, because otherwise what everyone's just going to be. And I was so struck by that courage. And so Charlie DeHanuka in the books is a guy who, he has a very successful radio call-in show, and people call in, and mostly, you know, late teens, early 20s, who have problems. And he's not like Dr. Phil. You know, he doesn't have every answer and no brain. He actually has actually thoughtful, and he's hurt. He's hurt. He knows what it's like, you know. So he knows how to listen, and he's empathetic. And so anyway, those 4 books exist, and I don't know. The Joanne books take, you know, they're coming out faster now, and they take time. And the other thing too is that we have, the kids are growing up, the grandkids are growing up, and I mean, I don't want to miss that. I mean, I want to see I want to be there for every, you know, as much as I can be there. And I love when Ben comes after school, you know, our Bouvier, because the boobs are, well, I guess I always think this is so amazing that dogs know when you're coming home, you know, when somebody's coming home. But I guess truly dogs don't have an awful lot more to do than
They keep track of you.
Yeah, you know, well, you know, it's probably bus time now, you know.
Yeah.
But she, you know, and I love when Ben comes home from school, and I mean, he's been this since he was in preschool, and I love when he comes in and we talk and, you know, just have that time. And so, I mean, that's, you know, I'm 74, and you start thinking, what do I mean, you know, what's left behind? What do you really value? And you know, that's it. I mean, that's really what I value. So you know, I think a little cutting back sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, not a bad thing.
No.
Another question for Gail. There's one right at the back there. Move the microphone. Yeah, please go ahead.
You come across as someone who's very considerate and thoughtful about other people, and I'd heard recently on the CBC that there'd been a study done that people who read fiction are more empathetic than people who don't read fiction. And I wondered whether or not writing makes you more empathetic.
Oh, yeah. And yes, the question is, does writing make a person more empathetic? And absolutely, because you really have to, I mean, you'd be a very bad writer if you just made quick judgments about, you know, white hats and black hats. This is a good guy or a bad guy. In real life, it's always more complex than that. And I think that that's the thing that you do as a writer, is that you really try to see all parts of that person and accept it. I mean, it's not that you condone it. But, I mean, I think the hardest things to do are to look at somebody who does something that is absolutely reprehensible. But where did that come from? I mean, you know, and you kind of have to understand that. And I think it does make you more empathetic, partly because I honestly don't believe you can be a good writer unless you look more, if you try to understand the whole person. You know, Carl Jung is big on understanding and for all of us, understanding and accepting all parts of ourselves. And he doesn't suggest that we have to perfect, you know, the flaws in ourselves, the dark side, as he calls it, that we have to perfect the dark side, but we have to at least acknowledge that it exists. And I think that that's what a writer does, is you can't, we all have that dark side. And, you know, one of the things in this book that I'm writing about mysteries with Joanne is that, excuse me, I quote Carl Jung saying, you know, it's by understanding our own darkness that we understand the darkness of others. And I think that's true of Joanne. She's certainly has, there are hints of this, and I think but I think it will come out more, but she is certainly, there are hints of real pain in her past, and, you know, and as a child, and, you know, and that comes out of certainly my own past too, and you know, I say only half jokingly, you know, if you've got a great relationship with your mother and you're a woman, forget writing. But don't. That is just a joke. You can love your mother. Anyway, yeah.
I think we have time for one more question. Have we got someone? Yes, at the back again on the other side.
I noticed in the excerpt that you read that you referred to Simon as having bipolar disorder.
It's a borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
It's another.
It's a different one.
Yeah, it is, and it's very, and there's not much known about it. There really isn't. And it's awful. It's because people they seem to vacillate from. They can be the most lovable people, and then all of a sudden there's something that goes amok. But it's a different thing. I mean, it's just why they call it borderline. I don't know. And all the reading I did, I don't know if a few years ago you remember that one of the Kennedys, his wife hanged herself in their garage, and she was a beautiful looking woman, and they had 4 kids, but she suffered from this, and she was a lovely, loving person, and then she would just become demanding and fraught, and kind of very much the way you see Simon in that just please don't leave me, and so it was it's a different, and it's and it is, there really is. I mean, I did a lot of reading on it, and there seems to be no known treatment. It just is, but not like bipolar, which is something I think we're understanding more and more about.
Maybe one more quick question? Why not? Do we have one? Another question? Go ahead.
Here we are.
Oh,
okay.
Okay, we have a...
I was just wondering if you regard your books as in some respects as an educational opportunity to talk about aspects of mental illness that way.
I think so. In some respects, I do. I mean, and I think it's, because there are certainly people who are, I mean, I think it's just, and I guess it's mental illness, but also anyone who somehow feels alienated, or doesn't seem to be fitting whatever norm we're supposed to have as a society. And I think I really try always to try and get people to see a whole person there. That there is this, and don't dismiss somebody. I mean, I think that's the worst thing. And I mean, I know when we're in Toronto, we live in Kensington when we're there, and we have we have so many people in our area in Kensington who are very, very ill and mentally ill, and and it's so easy just to pass them by. But I mean, even just saying hello and talking for a little bit, and we've got a halfway house up the street from us, and those guys talked to me, and one day I said, "How are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm not well." And I said, "Well, what's the problem?" And he said, "Well, I'm schizophrenic." And I mean, I thought, you sort of think I have a cold,
Yeah.
And I mean, just it was almost his sad kind of, it's just his acceptance of this is what it is, and yeah. So I hope it is. I hope I mean, I think every book, to me, every book should give us insight into the other, and I think should try and make us better people, because we're all pretty. I don't know. This seems to have been this, and I refuse to even mention what's going on south of the border at the moment, but there does seem to be. This seems to be a very alienated time, and where none of us are actually listening, or not us, but too many people are not listening, and I guess I think books are a place where you can learn and read and listen.
Well, on that note, we are out of time. Thank you so much for your questions and for being here. Gail Bowen. She'll be signing copies of her book at the back. If you haven't got a book, you can certainly get a copy.